The future is a story borrowing today's breath. It does not exist by itself in some distant warehouse of time, where events sit arranged like books upon a shelf, waiting for the librarian of fate to stamp them due. The so-called future is a rumor that the present tells itself when it is afraid to stand naked. We whisper of plans and projections as a child whistles in the dark, yet all the while, every prophecy is inhaled from this moment, and every promise is exhaled back into it. What you call tomorrow is not a place ahead. It is the movement of this very now, waving like a field of wheat, shimmering, never holding still, always appearing new because you have a habit of naming it later. The world is not a march toward an arrival. It is a dance that is never late. And you, dear listener, are not a pilgrim trudging toward salvation at the end of a calendar. You are the song itself, sounding in a single unbroken chord that we call the present. Consider how you chase what you already have. The feeling that life must add up, that it must make a final sum in some grand ledger. The career achieved, the love secured, the self perfected. But if you search carefully, you will find that the ledger has no last page, and that every entry is written with water. You are already in the only place where anything can be lived. The future's currency is counterfeit unless it is cashed here. The mind builds tomorrow out of paper walls and calls it security, yet even prisons made of dreams are prisons. The breath comes in, the breath goes out, and this tidal rhythm writes the only scripture that ever mattered. If you lean too far forward, you miss the syllables of the living sentence as it is spoken. If you cling to what has been, you hold the ashes and drop the flame. Therefore I say the future is not coming. It is happening, and it is happening as you. When we talk of destiny, we like to imagine a river with a map, origin, course, mouth, but the truth is more intimate. The river is not going somewhere. It is being a river, and its very being is to flow. You cannot understand a melody by asking where it ends. You must listen to how it moves. In the same way, your life is not a journey with a destination called later, but an unfolding of patterns that only shine when you stop trying to pin them to the corkboard of what's next. The story you tell of a future self, wiser, calmer, somehow finally valid, is beautiful in its way, but the beauty comes from the seeing, not the delay. The breath you are drawing at this instant is the ink with which the myth of tomorrow is written, and your willingness to feel it entirely is the only authenticity it will ever have. Deep exploration must begin here, with the sensation that this moment is not a step toward a better one. It is the source out of which the very idea of better springs. If that sounds like a paradox, good. Reality thrives on paradox. The ocean's surface is restless precisely because its depths are still. The play of forms is free because the ground of being is unbound. You are both the restlessness and the stillness, and your future is the way the restlessness composes a dance upon the stillness, not elsewhere, not later, here. Let us look closely at how the mind manufactures tomorrow. It takes a memory, a snapshot of what once seemed to happen, and projects it forward like a beam from a projector, where dust motes become stars and flicker into a film. In that cinema, you become a protagonist struggling toward a climax. But the theater itself is the present. The reel turns now, the light burns now, the audience breathes now, and when you step outside, you find that the nighttime air smells exactly like it did before you bought the ticket. The wisdom is not to destroy the cinema, but to enjoy the show without confusing the screen for the sky. For when you mistake the screen for the sky, you wait for a dawn that will never break, because the projector hums as long as you sit lost in plot. So I offer a different intimacy with time. Feel how your attention stitches before and after into a seamless cloth. When attention rests, the cloth is no longer needed. There is just the warmth of being. No fabric to hide beneath, no chill to defend against. In this warmth, the question of the future softens, and what remains is a marvelous, immediate world. The sound of a kettle, the shadow of a bird sliding over the wall, the friendly ache behind your eyes as you realize you have been awake the whole time, pretending to be dreaming. Let me tell you a small story. A man walks along a beach collecting shells, determined to find the perfect one to display upon his mantle. He passes thousands, some too small, some cracked, some ordinary. Hours pass. Finally, he sees a shell glistening in the foam, spiraled like a galaxy, every ridge precise. He reaches for it, and a wave tugs it from his grasp. He lunges again and again, and the sea, being playful, rolls it just out of reach. So intent is he upon possession that he fails to notice the sky turning honey, the gulls drawing calligraphy across the horizon. When at last he captures the shell exhausted, he looks up to find that the sun has gone. He carries perfection home in his pocket and mistakes the weight for fulfillment. But the real treasure was the evening he did not see. The future he chased borrowed the breath of that twilight and spent it elsewhere. Likewise, when you chase the future as an object, you spend this evening's breath and return home with a trinket. This does not mean one should not plan meals, build houses, plant gardens. On the contrary, planning is another dance of the present, hands sketching blueprints in the air of now. The difficulty arises when we imagine the plan to be more real than the cooking, the building, the planting. It is not. The plan is a seed. It must die into the soil of immediacy to live. If you cling to the seed, you will have no tree. If you bury it, you consent to transformation, and the transformation is always here. You will notice then that the most creative action arises not from tension toward results, but from an easeful intimacy with the process. Artists speak of losing themselves in the work, only to find in that loss a clarity that feels like home. The musician plays not to arrive at the last note, but to savor the whole phrase as it flowers, petal by petal, through time. The last note is silence, and silence has been with us all along. We frighten ourselves with the notion that if we do not clutch at tomorrow, chaos will devour us. Yet the heart beats without a contract. The lungs draw air without a schedule. The forest does not submit a quarterly report before it grows. Order is the gift of attention, and attention is available now. Paradoxically, when you rest in the present, you make better decisions about what you call the future, because you are not distorting your choices through the lens of anxiety. Anxiety is a magician pulling endless scarves from a hat labeled someday. Presence is the child who giggles and shows you the false bottom. One might say, but the future contains my hopes, my aspirations, the flowering of my efforts. Indeed, but hopes are like sails, not destinations. A sail catches the wind that exists, not the wind that might. The wind is this breath. Shape your canvas by all means, but feel the gust upon your cheek, the salt upon your tongue. Otherwise, you sit in harbor dreaming of oceans, while the tide itself laps the hull of your unmoving boat. The irony is merciful. When you feel the wind, the boat moves. When you ignore the wind for the map, you remain still, tracing lines upon paper and calling it voyage. We should notice, too, how the ego makes a career of tomorrow. The ego is not a villain. It is a skill, a mask crafted to interface with the theater of daily life. But it keeps applying for promotions, wanting to be chief executive of reality. It promises that with just a bit more time, more knowledge, more power, more applause, it will finally deliver you to yourself. Yet you are already delivered. What you are seeking with the ego is like trying to bite your own teeth. The more vigorously you chase, the more you circle. Instead, turn gently. See that awareness is present before strategy, before self-image, before effort. Awareness is the open sky in which the weather of your biography comes and goes. You do not have to banish clouds. You need only remember the sky. When I say the future is a story borrowing today's breath, I mean that every image of yourself later is a costume that depends upon this backstage. Without the luminous backstage of consciousness, the costume falls limp upon the floor. Therefore, work from the backstage. Wear the costume lightly, bow when the scene ends, and let the next scene arise from the same inexhaustible source. What you call growth is not the acquisition of a grander costume, but the relaxation of your grip upon the mask. The play becomes honest, spontaneous, alive. The audience, your relationships, your projects, the world, feels the difference. They respond, not to the perfect mask, but to the warm, breathing presence behind it. Let us press further. Why do we postpone being alive? We imagine that meaning lies in the cumulative weight of our efforts, like stacking stones into a tower high enough to reach the horizon. But the horizon is a mirage that recedes as we approach. The stacking becomes the point, and we mistake compulsion for purpose. In truth, meaning is not an object to be retrieved from the future. It is a quality of attention brought to the simplest act. Sip tea as though the universe were meeting itself in porcelain. Walk as though the earth were kissing your feet with each step. These are not sentimentalities, they are technical instructions for sanity. For when you inhabit your actions, you cease requiring a later moment to validate them. The doing completes itself in the doing, and the result, when it comes, is gravy. Now, how shall one live this understanding, not as a pleasant philosophy recited at sunset, but as a daily craft? Begin with breath, because breath is the workshop of time. Notice that you never breathe tomorrow, you breathe now. Let the breath be your tutor. When the mind gallops ahead, bring attention to the sensation of air entering the body, the delicate expansion and release. This is not an escape from life, it is a return to headquarters. From here you can see the countryside of your experience without getting lost in it. Decisions made from headquarters tend to be clear, not because they are free of uncertainty, but because they are congruent with the living rhythm. Next, play with intervals of purposelessness. Do something for no reason measurable by the ledger. Sit by a window without a book, hum a tune that leads nowhere, watch the rain draw silver threads across the pavement. In purposelessness, you rediscover the native intelligence of attention, which delights in the simple. This delight is not childish. It is the mature recognition that life is sufficient. When you re-enter your tasks, you carry this sufficiency like a fragrance, and your work changes character. You begin to design from generosity rather than fear, to teach from curiosity rather than authority, to love from freedom rather than need. The so-called future improves precisely when you stop demanding that it redeem you. Then, interrogate your shoulds. Every time you say, I should be further along, ask, further along than what? The line you imagine is drawn by comparison, and comparison is a thief that robs the moment to fund an abstract standard. Instead of chasing the standard, become intimate with your actual conditions. If you are tired, rest like a forest. If you are energized, move like a river in spring flood. Intimacy with conditions is not passivity. It is high-fidelity responsiveness. The dancer does not insist the floor be another kind. The dancer listens with the soles of the feet. In listening there is grace, and in grace there is efficiency. No wasted motion, no wasted worry. Cultivate small rituals that bring the infinite into the ordinary. Light a candle before you write an email. Place a hand upon your chest before a difficult conversation. Bow to the doorway as you leave a room, as if acknowledging that thresholds are sacred. These gestures are not magical in the superstitious sense. They are magical in the obvious sense. They reveal the magic that is already there. Ritual anchors the mind in the body in space, and space in the timeless presence from which time itself comes forth. When you are anchored, the wind of future thought can blow without capsizing you. On relationships, notice how we bargain with time in love. I'll relax when we've resolved this, we say, or I'll open my heart when I'm sure it won't be broken, or I'll be affectionate after I've finished my to-do list. But affection is not a reward. It is a medium. You do not wait to step into water until you have learned to swim. You step in and the water teaches you. Offer presence first. Look into the other's eyes as though you had already arrived, because you have. In that seeing, solutions often bud by themselves like green leaves after rain. And when solutions do not arrive, compassion does, which is a deeper form of intelligence than control. On work, adopt the craftsperson's vow. I will give myself to this task as if it were the only task in the world. This vow is not ascetic, it is liberating. It frees you from the prison of half-doing, the miserable compromise where you neither work nor rest, forever dangling between. When you fully work, time opens like a fan, and the pressure of results loosens. Ironically, productivity, if we must use the word, rises because the energy once spent on resisting the task returns to the task itself. The future of your project grows sturdy not through strain, but through wholehearted presence. On uncertainty, treat it as weather. You need not like rain to walk in it skillfully. Carry an umbrella of humor, a coat of patience, boots of willingness to be surprised. Uncertainty is not the enemy of fulfillment. It is the texture of reality rubbing against our preferences until they soften. When preferences soften, curiosity blooms. And curiosity is a compass that points not to a fixed north, but to the vividness of what it is here. Guided by curiosity, you find yourself saying, let me see what happens if, and in that sentence is freedom. Finally, practice endings. The future tyrannizes us because we fear the end of a conversation, a season, a life. So rehearse endings consciously. Finish your tea and place the cup down with a tiny bow. End your day by naming aloud one thing you release: the argument, the mistake, the double-edged hope. Let sleep take you like a tide, trusting that the shore will be there in the morning. Endings are not failures. They are the rhythms by which the song makes sense. When you learn to end gracefully, you do not cling to later, you meet it. Now let us let the vision ripen into a deeper transformation. The ego, which I called a useful mask, becomes translucent. Through it, the light of awareness shines without obstruction. And as awareness saturates your doings, a simple recognition dawns. There is no separate you steering a separate world toward a separate future. There is only the universe waving as this person, this breath, this decision, this laughter. The relief is extraordinary. You do not vanish, you relax. The dancer does not lose the dance. The dancer recognizes that dancer and dance are a single movement, and in that recognition, time's teeth stop gnashing. The future ceases to threaten or seduce. It becomes a flavor of now. Here is the philosophical heart resting like a pearl in the shell of everything we've said. What you are, in your deepest sense, is not a thing traveling through time, but the timeless capacity in which time appears. The stream of experience, thoughts, sensations, feelings, flows like music, but you are not caught in the flow as an object is caught. You are the listening, and the listening is unborn. From this vantage, the future is as intimate as the past, and both dissolve into the radiance of the present. This is not an idea to be believed. It is a simplicity to be noticed. When noticed, the compulsion to arrange the future to save the self softens, because the self no longer stands apart in need of rescue. The ocean does not fear the next wave. But what of purpose, meaning, the noble hunger to serve? They are not abolished in this seeing, they are clarified. Purpose becomes a creative impulse to participate in the grand improvisation. Meaning becomes a quality of aliveness, not a prize at the end. Service becomes natural because the boundary between me and you is recognized as a convenient fiction, like the lines on a map that do not appear on the land. You serve yourself by serving others because there is one life wearing many faces. From this clarity, action is not postponed to a future time when you are finally worthy or finally ready. Worthiness is the birthright of existence. Readiness is the willingness to begin where you stand. In this light, let us practice a short meditation, not as technique, but as remembrance. Sit or stand as you are. Let the spine rise as if drawn upward by an invisible thread. Feel the breath at the nostrils, the cool entrance, the warm return. Without altering anything, notice the vastness in which the breath occurs. Thoughts may visit like birds crossing the sky. Do not net them. Sensations may bloom and fade. Let them. Ask, not in words, but in silence, where is the boundary of this awareness? Search gently. Find none. Now from this boundlessness, open the eyes and meet the world, the same world but newly bathed. The kettle whistles, a car door closes, a child laughs, and you recognize these as chimes struck in the temple of now. The so-called future is made of these chimes. It cannot be otherwise. If grief is present, let it belong. If joy is present, let it belong. If boredom visits, seat it beside you and pour it tea. In welcoming, you dissolve resistance, and in dissolving resistance, you become transparent to the play. Transparency is peace. Peace is not an achievement. It is what remains when you stop insisting the script be different. From that peace, movement arises, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always appropriate, because it springs from listening, not from panic. This is spiritual freedom, not escape from the world, but intimacy with it. Not the construction of an armored future, but the unveiling of an unguarded presence. As we draw to a close, let the phrases we have shared fall away like scaffolding after a building is complete. Perhaps there is no building, only sky. The mind will return to its habits. It will plan, worry, rehearse. That is all right. Smile at it as you would smile at a playful dog tugging at your sleeve. Scratch its ears and carry on with the day. When you walk, walk. When you eat, eat. When you plan, plan with the ease of one who knows that plans are paper boats. lovely, fragile, set upon the current of now. Launch them, wave, and keep your hands free. Listen, the future is borrowing this breath again. Feel how it enters like a tide and leaves like a tide. Between the in and the out, there is a moment that is not a moment, a gap so subtle you can only live it, never grasp it. There, the world is infinitely fresh, as if made this instant. It always is. May you trust this freshness more than your fear. May you meet each scene as though you were returning to a beloved home, which of course you are. And may you find that the life you thought was coming later has been standing beside you all along, touching your shoulder, waiting for your glance. Now we will end without ending, as music does, by returning to silence, which is not the absence of sound, but the space in which sound is understood. Let this silence accompany you into the kitchen, into the street, into your work, your play, your sleep. Let it burnish your seeing until the ordinary glows like wet stone in moonlight. When you are told again by anxious voices that salvation lies just ahead, smile and breathe. Recognize the whisper as a story asking to borrow today's breath. You may lend it if you wish, but know the lender and the coin are the same. Spend generously. Spend here